Now, yesterday, as we left the studio at 6 a.m, yesterday, Saturday morning, on this program, we told you the news was starting to report this. And we told you that Vladimir Zelensky had left the White House abruptly, looking tense and unhappy. There was no handshake and no deal done. And we were thinking, well, you know, what happened? What's going on there? And of course, we know now that there was a heated debate and a failed meeting. Now, as you know, big news today and yesterday, as I say, as we're leaving the studio. So let me play some audio here for you, just to remind you from that meeting with Trump, Zelensky, and also J.D. Vance.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to this country.
There you are. You don't have the cards. You're in no position to negotiate. It's the language of a deal maker there, someone who understands leverage and how to use it. Donald Trump, of course, has spent his whole career and life doing these sorts of deals. The art of negotiation. Now, to discuss that part of this fascinating event, so less political but focusing in on what's happening in the minds of the various players in this negotiation, which is a very serious negotiation, of course, as you hear in that audio. You're gambling with World War III. Joining us now is the founder and CEO of Confidentially Speaking, lawyer, negotiation expert and mediator, Elise Margow is on the line. Hi there, Elise.
Hi, Pat. How are you doing?
I'm great. You must be watching this, am I right, Elise? And really on the edge of your seat and seeing the dynamics of what's going on with this negotiation and Trump. You know, he's been in the White House for a month and there's been a lot to watch and observe the whole process. This in particular, am I right, Elise, you're watching this and understanding the dynamic of what's happening here?
Yeah, it's been fascinating, Pat. It's been fascinating watching the personalities, the blow-up, and then everybody's comments afterwards. I've enjoyed watching what various people have to say from the left to right of politics and comedians. So I know it's not funny for Zelensky and other parties in the middle of it, but it's been quite entertaining to watch the reaction of everybody and how it played out.
What a good point. The reaction of everybody. You don't really know you know, what side to, or some people do, but yes, you can see it from different perspectives, can't you? From Trump's point of view, where he says, I want peace, I want to sort this out. Of course, Zelensky's saying, well, I'm not going to give up. There's a lot of emotion involved as well. So let's talk about that aspect of a negotiation. So Zelensky, of course, you know, the emotion just leading up to the meeting, you know, we've spoken about this before, you know, when you head to the meeting or some sort of, you know, a potential confrontation, you have to program your body. I guess he would have been tense because he wants to close the deal, and so does Trump. And I reckon Trump was a bit more relaxed than Zelensky.
Well, I think so. And I also think that Zelensky's preparation didn't take into account who he was dealing with. So, you know, Trump is a pretty open book in the sense I would call him his negotiation style pretty bullish and bullyish.
Yes.
And he never goes to fact. If you hear the way he talks around things a lot, and he's a marketer. So he'll market what he's trying to say, but he doesn't always have the facts at hand, and it's important to realize that and to hold back. Trump had given ideas of where he was going. He'd started using words like Zelensky is a dictator, Zelensky needs to have elections. You could see he was moving away from giving Zelensky free rein to putting forward Putin's version of events. And whether you agree with it or not, that's where he was going well before this meeting took place. So Zelensky needed some time before coming in there to really work with marketers and people who are more psychologists than political players in the middle of a war to say, well, how do I deal with someone in the way I come across? What are the words we have to use here? And I was actually watching Fareed Zakaria on Real Time with Bill Maher, and he came up with the absolute perfect opening.
Yeah, okay.
And he said, clearly Zelensky's emotional. He's in a war. But if you read Trump, if Zelensky had walked in and said, Trump, you are the most brilliant person. You're coming at this from a completely different viewpoint. I really want to hear you. And by the way, you're so great. Here is an award from the Ukraine and a medal for all the work you're going to do. And I'd love you to come and visit us and we can talk some more.
Okay.
He said, you turn it around and he's already talking to you because, here it is. And I'm not sure that Zelensky would give Trump minerals or Denmark will give him Greenland.
Right.
But, getting that award and being brought in, suddenly he's the hero and he's going to start listening.
Australia Overnight, Elise Margow is a mediation expert and joins us in the program. So do you think Trump would have fell for that, the so great and the award? Because sometimes in my journey, you know that you've been lined up in different jobs and things and you try to be nice or it blows up in your face. They think you're weak and they just give you another kick in the you-know-whats. But I do agree with you. If you had started off that way, it would have softened the atmosphere, and the media was watching too. That was another thing. I guess when people are watching, you do act a bit differently. I'm thinking about just me being behind the microphone. You get an adrenaline rush, and I know that people are watching you and me now, so the way I phrase things might be a little different. So that would have given it a dynamic that Zelensky had to be prepared for as well.
Yeah, and I saw how he began, and I understand where he was coming from because he felt he'd been blindsided continually and misrepresented. And he wanted to come across and say, you can't just tell me to make peace with Putin. Putin doesn't make peace. Putin's, he's invaded Ukraine before, and he's trying to give a history lesson and showing photos of how Putin has treated people in jail, and that he has, allegedly taken, and I'm using legal language now, allegedly taken children, Ukrainian children, and and given them to Russian parents. And there's a whole issue there of what we call kidnapping, breaking of international law, all kinds of breach of international law, all kinds of things. But a media conference is not the time to do it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And as you say that too, reading the dynamic or the personality, the psychology, and I mean this, I'm going to say that, and Trump later in a press conference said he cares about everybody, and I guess he does, but you have to focus in on their hot buttons, or he wants those minerals. He wants to do a deal, a commercial deal, and if you come in and say, here's photos and here's the war and all this sort of stuff, Trump's thinking, well, I know all that, and I don't, today I don't care about that. I want to do this deal. So he might have got his back up. Am I reading that correctly, what you're saying there, Elise, that, the photos... it wasn't the right time, and it wasn't playing to what Trump is really thinking about in that moment.
Yes, I think, Trump then actually J.D. Vance lost control, and then Trump lost control of where things were going. But up until that stage, Trump had seemed, in his own way, the way he was talking, there was no clear distinction of where he was going, but he seemed to say, we're going to do a deal, we're going to do things like that. And if Zelensky then had said, Mr. President, I really respect you and I really want to see what kind of deal we can do, because peace is obviously our ultimate aim here, but a peace in which Ukraine can live securely within its borders without fear of, further attacks. If those were the words he used, and I'm willing and I want to hear your view and see where we can go and leave it like that and move onwards, that would have curtailed where they were heading. And, with negotiations, you would be getting people who Trump respects start talking to them in back rooms. You would be talking to them in back rooms. You wouldn't be doing anything in front of the media. But I think both ways. I don't think Trump has an ultimate aim with Ukraine. I don't think he really has a complete strategy, except he wants the war over and he doesn't want to spend too much more money on arms. But he doesn't have a real vision for what that looks like. So also the way he's talking and in negotiations that what we do look for, even if it's an interim solution, he didn't really have a long-term view as to how he was going to create peace, because he doesn't seem to understand where Putin is coming from and Putin's idea of a greater Russian republic, which may include Poland. And if it does, it means that NATO has to get involved. So there's a lot more on the table, but you don't want to be having this discussion in front of a whole lot of media.
Yes. Negotiation expert Elise Margow in Australia overnight. So Trump hasn't got that long-term vision, but he's gone to his normal playbook, which is to bring it to a head. He does, okay, so long-term vision, I don't know where this is going to go. This is his boldness and his courage. This is what I think defines Trump and these deal makers. Yeah, they don't know where it's going, but what they do is push the buttons for the emotion. They bring it to a head. Was it an accident that it was going to end up that way? Maybe not. So then he makes his decision where it's going to go. He's going to, okay, we'll bring it to a head and we'll have an argument and you'll be emotional and you'll say something. And it's also given him leverage now, Trump, because, and we all learn this, I think, in our lives, as soon as you become emotional, you lose. And the trap has, so now poor old Zelensky, he's needs to obviously represent his people and he wants to do things his way. But now that he's become emotional, am I right here? I have watched it and I might be misleading it. People will tell me if I'm wrong. But now that he's become emotional, he looks like the unhinged one in a way, where Trump can come out and say, well, he doesn't want peace, he doesn't want a deal, and I won't invite him back until he's ready.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I actually think the one who looked unhinged was J.D. Vance more than Zelensky. He can't play Trump, and he doesn't have the information to be in the discussion. And he came across as
the attack
Trump's
dog,
bully boy, the attack dog. He was there to attack, and when Zelensky quite rightly said to him, but you don't understand about the ceasefire and that Putin didn't comply with his ceasefire. Or have you ever been to Ukraine? And Vance's thing was, well, I looked at the stories. He looked very weak, and that is from a worldview. He didn't look like a leader, and he certainly didn't look like he could step into Trump's shoes anytime.
Interesting, J.D. Vance, okay, because I saw less of that and mostly the exchange between Trump and Zelensky. I did read that J.D. Vance was saying, you haven't said thank you once. But the fact was he had said thank you several times in that meeting and beforehand. So this is where I guess the frustration comes, and I think our listeners could relate to this as well, and I'm sure it happens in your world. Other people are starting to create a narrative. You can see this. Trump and J.D. Vance will keep saying what they want to say, whether it's real or not, and start to create a story that suits where they want to go. And if you lose control of that story, it's very frustrating.
It is, and it's hard, that's why I always say, when we're looking at negotiation, again, I wouldn't be negotiating in front of the media, but unless tactically it works. There could be a strategy that part of my strategy is I'm going to say something in the media which is going to help my negotiation, behind the scenes. So it's either back channeling people who can get to the other side and who will have their ear, or it is actually saying things in the media that are going to enhance it, like how brilliant Trump is, again, because we have to deal with Trump's ego. Yes. And then it's also who needs to be in the room. And I would have been quite concerned if I was Zelensky seeing J.D. Vance there, because he isn't a foreign You know, he's not the Secretary of State. Why is he in the room? And if he's in the room, should Zelensky have brought someone else into the room? Should he have come with someone? And I don't have the answer for this. I don't know enough about it.
But I reckon you would have walked into negotiations and thought the same thing. Why is this person here? I've been ambushed. There's what would you do, Elise? I'd kick the table over and walk out.
We use a word in negotiation called labeling. I'd label it. And I'd say, wow, look at this, here the two of us are talking, and I see that J.D. Vance is here, and I see Marco Rubio's here. Wow, I feel a bit outnumbered, right?
Yes,
wow,
brilliant. That would tell everybody,
impressive.
oh, wow, I didn't expect this. Oh, what are you doing here?
Oh, and then say, look, this makes me feel important, President
Yes,
Trump.
gotcha.
You,
you're a master.
You brought people along, and wow, I never thought of that. Well, thank you. Thank you for showing how important you see this visit to be. And suddenly you've moved the conversation onward. Yes. But it's, I mean, one has to feel a little bit sorry for Zelensky because he's fighting a massive war for 3 years. He's trying to keep his country together. And now he's playing games within the White House, but unfortunately, as a leader, you have to do this. But I don't think any party came out looking very, on top. I know that most of the Europeans and many of the Western countries have come out in support of Zelensky after this, but that doesn't stop what people saw and how they feel he was treated by Trump and how the Trump supporters feel Zelensky behaved towards Trump. I don't think anyone's come out looking tops here.
Good on you, Elise. It's always a pleasure. You're wonderful and one of the best in the business. So you're from Confidentially Speaking, the founder and CEO, and we'll put this up on our podcast so people can re-listen to our chat if they want to. And I know you'll share it on in your world as well, Elise. So we appreciate your time in Australia overnight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. Always a pleasure.
Elise Margow, founder and CEO of Confidentially Speaking, lawyer, negotiation expert and mediator on Australia Overnight.